Welcome to Generations at Work, and today's topic, we're going to be having a conversation with Gen Z. And as a reminder to our audience, if you want to learn more about how to lead in a multi-generational environment, we can bring this training right to your team. Go to maxwellleadership.com/generations at work, fill out that form, and it'll take you right to that information. Today, our topic is conversations with Generation Z. Dr. Elmore, you want to introduce our guest for us today?
I would love to. Thanks, Susan. So today, listeners and viewers, we have two members of Generation Z, two people that I have come to love. They're both in their 20s, and let me introduce them to you real quick, and then Natalie and Christian, we're going to let you fly with this. The first one is Natalie. Natalie, you and I met some years ago out in LA where you live, and I came to really appreciate your value add to the organization you work with and just your thoughts and insights. I think you're going to be helpful today. And then Christian, you and I met some time ago, and I've admired your entrepreneurship and your initiative. Both of you have that. But anyway, thanks for joining us today. Appreciate you being with us.
Thank you.
Absolutely.
So let me start by just giving our listeners a quick roundup of Gen Z. Sometimes I think, Susan, we have business leaders that listen and they go, man, these millennials are all I got to figure out how to lead them. And I go, the millennials, sir, are your assistant managers right now. Gen Z represents the newest generation in the workforce. They would be young professionals, many of them right out of college. Many of them still in school, but the two we have with us are young professionals. So Generation Z would really only have memories of the 21st century, if you think about it. That's when they have grown up. They're the new kids on the block. Some social scientists believe they began as early as 1997, some as late as 2003. I think the turn of the century was such a pivotal point where things began to rock in our world. The dot-com era bubble burst, the 911 terrorist attacks happened, the introduction of the smartphone, anxiety and mental health issues started becoming normalized. And then the kids entered the workforce and we felt like they're not getting off their phones, So it was this divide that began to happen quite naturally because we weren't thinking, how do we introduce them to the workforce? So Natalie, I'm going to shoot the ball to you first. I just shared like a 2-minute summary of your generation, which is not fair. What would you add or delete from the data I just shared? Talk about your generation from your angle real quick.
Yeah, I think that what you shared was super accurate for me, at least. I mean, my first phone was an iPhone and it was in elementary school. And so, yeah, that's just what I grew up with. That's what was around. That's the technology that we had when I was growing up. So I don't remember it any different. I don't remember never having social media. Of course, I don't remember 9/11. I was 3 months old.
Wow. Yeah. That's crazy. Christian, how about you? Jump in.
Yeah, so I was born in 98. A little bit later, got a little bit of taste of the older times, the newer times, but still being born into the digital age. And I do agree with some things about what you stated. And there's also this conversation that should be had about how that could increase our adaptability and resourcefulness. I really do think that we are viewed as distracted or disengaged. And I really do feel like we can look at that through a different lens and say that we're purpose driven and we just don't stick to the traditional path. And I don't think that's a wrong thing.
Yeah. No, I think you're right. And I'm sorry, Susan. I talked to an employer recently that was saying they're just not ready for the workforce. I have so much experience. And yet I talked to a Gen Zer that said something similar, Christian, to what you just said. Yeah, all your experience so far is much about the 20th century. What I bring in is the 21st century, which is the future last time I checked. So you do bring some things that we, at least my generation, needs. Yeah. Were you wanting to jump in there?
Well, I was just saying, I hear that. I work with a lot of our corporate clients, and I hear that they're not ready for this. Yeah. This generation's not ready for the workforce, or this generation doesn't value hard work and all those things. So I mean, I'd love to hear from you guys. Tell us the value that your generation brings to the workforce.
You want to start, Natalie?
Yeah, sure. I think it can also be kind of frustrating to hear as someone in Gen Z when they say, oh, you guys don't value hard work, you don't know what it's like, but then they want to neglect to give us that opportunity to then prove ourselves. And so I've gotten a job straight out of high school when I was 18 years old, worked full time, in school full time, and I've kept that exact same job for over 5 years now. And then you also hear from older generations that we like to move from job to job, skip around, won't commit somewhere. That's obviously not true for myself. And now I'm earning my master's degree and I'm still in school full time while working full time. I take care of family members full time. So it can be frustrating hearing that from older generations without first giving us a chance to prove ourselves differently.
I love that. And I think you're a great example of that from what I know about your life. You're similar to another Gen Zer who said, my boss keeps getting angry at me that I leave right at 5 and I just am so much in a hurry to get out. But he said, what my boss doesn't know is I'm rushing off to another job because I have 3 jobs just to make ends meet. And I thought, oh my gosh, we didn't even think about that. Yeah. So
they get categorized.
Yeah.
And again, we're building walls instead of bridges with the different generations.
Yeah. Christian, jump in on the same thought.
Yeah, I mean, I definitely want to use that as a segue, but also know that, John Maxwell, a really good mentor of mine, and he always says that change is inevitable and we can choose to be ahead of it. And my argument is always, if we can choose to be ahead of it, we're not going to be ahead of it if we continually stay the same and where we're at. And with Gen Z, the thing I love the most about being part of it, and also just the generation in total, is that we're adaptable, is that we can get it done. And to have this label put on us that we're not hardworking because it didn't take us X amount of time. If our metric is time, it's not going to be as applicable because now our metric is about skill. And I just really think that if we're going to fairly assess the generation, we have to look at what can they do and how can they do it efficiently versus how long it took, because we're in the digital age and there's no better generation to consult about the new age than the people in it.
Yeah, that's very, very well put. I remember being your age and being on staff with John Maxwell right out of college. And I remember he didn't ask me to clock in. He asked me to put out. And that's results were his love language. And I love, you just described it that way. If bosses would quit looking at the time clock and look at the productivity, we might get somewhere.
So how do we get, leaders from other generations? How do they lead you best? Like, what is it? And I think setting the expectations, but how can leaders lead you best, this generation, Gen Z? Natalie, you want to go first?
Sure. Right off, exactly what you said on just leading by example. I think it goes so far and it means so much when leaders, managers, people that are overseeing me show me how to do something with their actions. The way they want me to behave in the workplace, they're also exemplifying. Because it's really frustrating when you're being told something, but then you see something completely different from the people who are supposed to be your leaders. So my favorite is always just leading by example, acting how you want me to act, speaking how you would want me to speak to you.
Yeah, that's good.
I like that. What about you, Christian?
I think that Generation Zers, they thrive under leaders that are transparent and collaborative. It is a communication standpoint, and we have to be open to feedback. But if there isn't a transparency or collaboration involved, I don't think they'll be as receptive. This generation isn't a generation that, for lack of a better word, is submissive because they feel like they have to be. This is the generation of people that want opportunity and equal opportunity, but also to grow essentially to where their leader is. And I just think that, micromanaging, it's not as practical anymore. And giving clear expectations and enabling trust, these are things that I think Generation Zers will thrive with if you can trust them with it.
Yeah, I agree. Trust is such a message that screams, you can be autonomous. I know you're going to get the job done. I think you just described, here's a term I'm using, Christian, I want to get your feedback. I feel like the era of the gatekeeper is fading fast. That means the boss that was command and control, I'm pulling all the strings, and you're going, we have access to information, buddy, and I don't know that we need you for that. Turn me loose. Now, we want to hire responsible people for sure, but I think too many of us that are my age anyway, we were gatekeepers. And it was all about command and control. And if a boss leads that way, I think it's mostly guys that get this way. I don't know what you think about that, but we need to be much more realizing there's a democratization of the workforce right now. We need to take advantage of that.
Yeah, and to your point, if if we both have access to the exact same information, the only thing that we're going to look at the end of it is who delivered it faster. And not even worrying about titles, age, even generations. If we take one person and another person, no matter where they're from or how they were raised or when they were raised, whichever person can get those results faster is going to be the person that essentially ends up on top. And I think that, traditionally it was a big boss and it was the big man on campus. It was, he knows things that we don't know. But now, since we have access to so much information, we have to understand that certain people that are pivotal in this age are the people that know how to navigate it. So I think that conversation comes up a lot with Gen Zers, and it's almost the older generations, some value it and some feel like it's an attack. Oh, I've been an account executive for 20 years. What makes you so qualified? And honestly, half of the job was just finding the information. So, a lot of that comes up.
That's so true. So true. Let me ask you a question. And Natalie, why don't you go first? If you knew you were speaking to a bunch of people over 45 years old, and they were wanting to know who you are as a generation, what do you wish older people knew, leaders knew, that and might help them with?
Yeah, I wish older generations would know that it doesn't need to be scary. It doesn't need to be something that you're afraid of doing, of reaching out and connecting to somebody who's in our generation, who's in Gen Z. We're so much like you guys, but I feel like we get this notion that we're too different to connect with, or you don't know how to even talk to us, but just talk to us. We're just your coworkers. We're your colleagues now. We're not little kids anymore. We want to connect with you. We do want that. We do not want to be separated. And so I hope that would take some of the pressure off of those older generations, feeling like it's so hard to connect and it's so hard to be involved with Gen Z when it doesn't need to be, because we want to connect with you guys as well, as long as you are being genuine, being transparent, being truthful, and do want to make an actual connection with us as well.
Good. Excellent.
That's such a good,
Yeah.
as I think about just last week working with a client, their perception was so different than that. So I love hearing that.
I just read some data that said more than half of Gen Zers say, I've not talked to someone over 50 years old in the last year at my workplace. Mm-hmm. Now, Natalie, you're in a smaller workplace, but that's crazy. And I think it's because the older folks didn't want, it's too much work, I don't even understand them, and that's not going to get the job done.
But leaders have to move to the people. They can't expect the people to move to them.
Yeah, that's right.
So it's as an older generation, I'm a Gen Xer, even myself, I've got to be intentional about moving to another generation, moving to that next generation, whether I'm leading them or not, even just cross-functionally.
Yeah, colleague, yeah. Christian, your thoughts?
Something I definitely have to share with older generations is that we are not lazy, but we do work differently. And I think that we both care about impact and purpose. Through generations, we have our different variables. But I just think that Generation Zers, they don't believe in the traditional workplace hierarchies. They just don't. They just don't want, they look at leaders and they embrace it through action, not their title, and responsibility. And I just feel like we all have a collective responsibility to get the work done regardless. We can't use the same metrics we used to, and we can't look at the things that we used to look at in order to dictate who needs to be where and how long. I think that we need to pay more attention to how we're getting things done. And if we're more of a collaboration, as I said earlier, it'll be done either way. So I really think that other generations need to understand Gen Zers are not lazy.
Yeah.
Christian, I want to ask you a question on that too, because I agree with you, but a lot of the older generation says, hey, let's get them in the office. Let's get them into, they don't want to work. They're lazy. They want to sit at home and work, right? Tell me where that role of how you collaborate or want to collaborate with other generations, what does that look like? Because maybe it's not in the office, but I hear that so much with some of the clients I work with, that they just want to be at work from home. And so I lose good talent because I want them in the office.
Of course. I think that there's a few conversations that definitely have to be had. Getting young people in the office, they're not in the office because they don't like the office. Because in any room, the people gravitate towards the leader. So before we talk about the space that we operate in, we have to talk about the person that's inviting me to said space. We have to look at how well are we communicating? Is this an environment that I feel like will be conducive for me? And if you can't relate to not even just Gen Zers, but any generation, if you can't find a connectedness or relatability, there's no trust. And before they even walk through that door, and door being a metaphor, is that they don't trust you. And I think that if you want to find that relatability factor, that factor that connects us, you have to find it before you have an expectation of them. Because I can't look at you and expect you to be and do if I have no idea who you are. Because everyone learns different.
Which takes me to a major point of conversation today. Every single Gen Zer I had in my dozens and dozens of focus groups was they long for relationship. And many supervisors just don't have the time for that. But I feel like good luck with that, Charlie. So the data shows 4 big concepts that make up Gen Z. I want you to listen to these 4 and then both of you comment on them. We'll start with you, Natalie. The data shows the majority of Gen Z shares these qualities. High entrepreneurship, so a keen interest in entrepreneurship. High anxiety, that's the mental health thing. High skepticism of authority. And then a high sense of agency. So you feel like, I can do this. I bet you both feel that, but I want to hear, I don't want to put words in your mouth. Natalie, start out on those 4. What rings true and what would you like to comment on?
For me, all of them are true, and I see them all a lot in all of my peers as well. High anxiety, and that is likely from the world being so cynical once we were born and started growing up. Movies got more graphic, all of the world's technology just at our fingertips. And you can see all of the negative in that, but then of course I see all of the positive as well. But the thing to remember, especially for my generation, is that we get blamed because of that, as if the older generations weren't the ones raising us. So we get blamed for always being on our phones, but I was given an iPhone in year 3 of elementary school. And so we get blamed for seeing the world so cynical, but you guys were the ones putting out the movies that were super graphic, with all the content that was really inappropriate. And so my generation often gets blamed for the effects that came from generations that were actually ahead of us, and we were just the kids, but they've shaped who we are today. And so I think all of the 4 traits that you named were extremely true to myself. I don't know about you, Christian, if you want to comment as well.
Yeah, I mean, I definitely see why those things would be listed, and I understand and relate to them. And I also think too, leading off of your comment, Natalie, of them and feeling this blame for decisions they made, is how can you expect so much from a generation that you're putting just negative comments on, and naturally now we already have a disconnect because there is no room for growth. And already we believe in self-advocacy and taking control of our own lives. This leads into the entrepreneurial side of things. But we look at it and say, why wouldn't they want a traditional job? And it's because, well, the generation, they're ahead of us. They're not giving us room to grow. And I just feel like in Generation Z, we question the systems. We question what's happened and where they're at and say, that didn't work. Why would we do it again? So I just really think that all those things are very practical, especially with the high anxiety. I mean, that comes with constant digital connection and everything that happens in society and economically, we can see it by the snap of our fingers. And whether that be a good or bad thing, there's going to be anxiety because it's so unexpected and we're not prepared for it. So I think those are all valid arguments.
I feel like we could sit here and talk for hours. I'm so interested in talking to you guys. We only have a few more minutes. I do want to note that I think you both said something that I've heard multiple times today, and I make sure our listeners are hearing this. Trust is important.
Huge.
And developing the relationship. And we know this. Relationships are the foundation to leadership. So if you're a leader of Gen Z or any generation, trust is going to be important and relationships are going to be important. All right, last question, because I know we have to wrap up. Just, as you peer in the future, what do you see more of, hope or despair? Natalie?
I see way more of hope rather than despair, especially because millennials are becoming leaders as well. They're stepping into more managerial roles, and even Gen Zers are as well. So I see a lot of hope. I think older generations want to build relationships. I think they want to connect with Gen Z and millennials. So I don't think it's all doom and gloom or all despair. As long as the people that are currently in managerial roles are acting like leaders, not like managers, because again, Gen Z doesn't really care if you have the title of manager. Are you acting like a leader? And if so, then there's a lot of hope.
Yeah,
Great.
that's good.
Thank you. Christian.
I think that I can understand why it's hope or despair, but I really think that we're going to land on hope every time, especially with this generation, because even through climate issues and economic uncertainty and just the world seeming like it's ending various times, I think that through Gen Z, they're always pushing for change. They're always innovative. They're always inclusive. And I think that that resilience and adaptability that gives me, and I think that my peers will think the same. It gives us hope that we'll create solutions. You know, this isn't a space where we want to look at the world and some prior generations things would happen and we have to stop. We have to stop creating. We have to stop questioning. And I think that Gen Zers, they'll always find a solution.
Yeah. You know, this has reminded me, Susan, how much the answer is often found in the middle. It's not that extreme or this extreme. And you guys have actually given me hope. I so love and believe in both of you. And I feel like the future is going to be bright if you just take over. But I feel like my generation, which fills, for instance, Washington, D.C. right now and refuses to leave, just wants to be reelected. I'm going, oh my gosh. So you know what ran through my mind? I love using this analogy, but maybe this is a good one to close with. When I read a good book, and I mark it up. I have 4 highlighters, and each of the highlighters are different colors, and one is for good quotes, one is for great stories, one is for good data that I want to remind myself, so that's green, and then another one is just an important sentence I want to highlight in yellow. But there's 4 different colors that have 4 different purposes. I feel like, Susan, the 4 generations that are at work are just 4 different colors of highlighters, and we need all 4 to get the job done. And you two represent a color that I need. I wouldn't mark it up. I wouldn't get it marked up right. I would miss some things. I would miss some data. And so I think maybe that's just cheesy. I don't know. But I feel like I'm helped if I realize that Natalie and Christian have a highlight color
that I don't have.
I got mine.
Yeah.
And it's really incomplete.
And we need the whole
right.
color
That's
system.
so true. So
Natalie, Christian, thank you so much for being here with us today. We hope you've enjoyed. We've enjoyed. I know I've enjoyed our time with you.
Too.
Reminder to our audience, if you want to learn more about how to lead in a multi-generation environment, go to maxwellleadership.com/generations at work. We also have a free learner guide for you that you can download. Use this at your work. Thank you again for being here. I'm your host, Susan Davis, with Dr. Tim Elmore, Natalie, Christian. Thank you so much.